Whoa, 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 stop! Welcome back to another edition of the Wizard Shop. As you guys seen in a previous video, this is the 1980 Triumph TR8 that we have in the shop. As I mentioned in the previous video, it was actually shooting sparks at the owner Bill's crotch when he was driving. And as you just seen in the intro, it looked like a little inferno down there. Something going on with the steering column when the bushing is shot, so when the shaft touches the body, sparks start flying. This video we're going to go over today, I'm going to talk about the pitfalls of buying a car when you start seeing do-it-yourself wiring. This car is absolutely full of do-it-yourself wiring. Different people over the years have bypassed stuff, done all kinds of strange things, and we're going to take a look. I'm going to go through and show you those items. This car also has a battery drain even with the key off. So I'm going to show you some of the ways that I test for that. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to start from the front and work our way back. And as I've been digging into this thing and kind of isolating and coming down to the process of elimination of what's going on here, I have just found all kinds of patches and do-it-yourself kind of backyard mechanic work, and it's just the things that have been done to this car are not in a service manual. You won't find them in a factory diagram. So we're like, well, what did they do? You don't know. You have to find out. You have to dig around, and it takes way longer to do it this way. The first thing I noticed, there's an inertia switch here, which I guess is not a bad thing if it's got an electric fuel pump. But the wiring is, I've traced it into up under the dash, and it's just routed in all kinds of strange places, and some of the connections are not very good. And there's this gray wire that runs up to, you can see it running into the loom there. What does that do? What does that go to? That's not in a factory diagram. That could be a problem. I mean, I've got some ideas of what's wrong with this car, but I'll go through some of the pitfalls and some of the issues when you first start out trying to deduce what's wrong and you run into these roadblocks. So, also you can see over here all these wires. Someone has actually written with a marker what each thing goes to. They've been in there finagling around. You can see that there's wires that have been doubled up that shouldn't be doubled up. There's all kind of connections there. It's like, what's going on here? Let's take a look under the dash where we were just at the intro. You can see a gray wire hanging right in front of you. That goes to a switch. And I turn on the switch and the fans come on. And I'm like, why? Is there something they were chasing there? I've looked at all the service history on this car, and they mention having to put a battery shutoff in it. They don't say why. Something's wrong here, and there's no mention of it, and it's just kind of scary to me. So if you dig deep inside the dash in there, there's wires scattered all over the place, and where do they go? It's anybody's guess. Again, not in a factory diagram. It's what I call brain work. You have to start using common sense. Where does the wire go? Why does it go there? What are they trying to bypass? That takes a lot of time. Let's go to the other side. As you're looking in there, there's a huge connection with a bunch of battery cables. I don't even know if that's stock. It might be. But as I was chasing around in there, there's wiring that's going to and fro, and it's not factory. It's not supposed to be there. Anything that's been touched, anything that's been messed with in this car, that could be the issue. But which one is it? Where? That's the dilemma here. Any factory manual that would show step-by-step diagnosis of tracing down wiring problems is not going to be effective at all in this situation. Pretty much useless. It's going to take experience. As you can see, there's relays that's supposed to screw into the fuse box here. And there's several relays. They're just kind of stuffed in there. So that means somebody's had this all apart and messed with it. They didn't put it back together correctly. Is that the issue? Is that the problem? This is another one of the issues. When you go to buy a car, especially an older car like this, you really got to dig deep, because the question is not does it run good, does it drive good? The question is, who's been in here? What have they done? Is it going to burn the car to the ground? Or what kind of issues are you going to find there? So that's what I'm dealing with there, and let's go to the trunk. So a little bit ago I mentioned in the service records they talked about installing a battery shutoff for a battery drain, a disconnect switch. They should have tried to figure out what the drain is and get to the bottom of the problem so it's possibly not a fire hazard. Instead they chose to install a shutoff switch, and when the car is not being used you just turn it off. And that just seems pretty lame to me. Why don't we figure out what's wrong so the car can be enjoyed instead of doing this? That adds complication to the problem. So not only do we have a short circuit that's actually shooting sparks and could potentially catch the car on fire while it's driving, it's also killing the engine. Whatever's shorting is really pulling the power down and killing the ignition system. We also have, when the key is off, the sparks stop, but there's still a drain. With this switch on, with the key off, it will kill the battery in a day. So the first thing I need to figure out is what's draining the battery. Maybe that's our spark problem. But anytime you have a battery drain or anything going on in that manner, and you say, well, what is it? You can spend days and days and days trying to find it. I'm going to show you how I find out. I have this Snap-on Vantage. It's old. It's an older model. But it's so simple to use. I really enjoy this. This is an oscilloscope or a multimeter. It does multiple different things. I've got it set to amps, 10 amps. And if we disconnect the battery, and then I put a little metal piece of wire over the terminal so I can connect to it. Put one here and one to the terminal, the actual terminal. So we've got this hooked up, and this is going to measure amperage draw. It should be like 0.005, very small draw with the key off. This doesn't really have computer modules in it, so there really shouldn't be nothing drawing power on this car with the key off. But when we turn this battery switch on, the key is currently off, by the way. So we see that there's 1/3 of an amp being drawn, and that's like a light bulb. And that makes sense because we have a light bulb on. So that's probably very likely our drain there. The key thing that you would do here is actually pull the bulb or turn the switch off and see what kind of amperage you have. But when I have the key on, there's about 8 or 9 amps being pulled. And when I turn the key, when I try to start it, obviously the starter's pulling a lot of amps, and it's too much for this thing. You can't pull that kind of power through this. But our issue with the sparks is only happening while cranking or in the engine running. Once we figure out where our small drain is, is that the problem? Is that causing the sparks? And if not, then we have 2 separate issues going on here. Let's go take a look on the other side of the engine bay. As you can see right here, there's 2 wires going into one. That's not stock. I got to figure out why. This one looks like it's gotten hot, black. Could be just a black wire, but it looks kind of like it's gotten hot. And down here, there's a whole bunch of crimps and a bunch of uninsulated wires. It's kind of a spaghetti mess. So I still have a ways to go to figure out exactly where the sparks are coming from. I was thinking if you guys in the comment section, what do you guess? What do you think it is? And when you post on there what you thought it was, by then I should have found out what it really is, and we can compare. And when we do another video, when we go through do more work on this car, we'll talk about and see were you right or were you wrong. So it'll be kind of like a guessing game. What do you guys think it is? And then I'm going to find out really what it was. It's going to take me a while to figure this one out. But I just thought I'd show you guys what I'm running up against. When you go to buy a car, you have to be very careful. These kind of issues can be very, very expensive. It costs hours of diagnosis. And so, on top of everything else I've got going on in the shop, I've got the Hoopty Patrol, we've got Uvi's DeLorean. We've got his H2 in here with brake leaks. I've got to put the 996 turbo back together. We've got a whole bunch of things going on top of having to figure out this complex wiring issue. And that's part of running a shop, is scheduling and trying to figure out what needs to be done, prioritizing. But I look forward to finding out what's wrong with this car. It's really a cool car. It's basically a TR7 with a V8, a Rover V8. And there's some differences, like the battery's not located in the engine. As you've seen, it's in the trunk. There's a lot of little subtle little differences. It's got power steering and obviously the V8 engine. But it's basically a TR7. Being that it's an older vehicle, it doesn't have a lot of computers and gadgets and stuff with it, which makes it easier, but that's also why it has had over the years mechanics or shade tree mechanics or people who are not such good mechanics try to attempt to fix it themselves. What we're seeing here is not something that happened in the last year or two. This is over the decades that this car has existed. Different people along the way have done different things to try and bypass or try to make something work in a way or a manner that wasn't designed to work. And like I mentioned a minute ago, when you guys are looking to buy a car, those are key things that you see when you look under the hood. All of a sudden these wires running everywhere. And then you should start asking, what happened? Why? Why is it that way? Ask the seller, what's going on with this? What happened to have this wiring ran? What is it they're trying to bypass? You'll have to ask the seller. And the chances are the seller may not even know, because in his time of owning the car, it may not even been done on his watch. It may have been the guy before him. Which comes to mind, this weekend, I was interested in buying a 98 to 2004 Beetle, a 1.8 turbo. I thought that'd be a neat little car to have. Me and Mrs. Wizard drove all the way to Kansas City based on an ad, and I also communicated with the seller that it had a clear title, it ran good, and it needed nothing. When I got there, things started not adding up. They showed up late. Then they started talking about how the title is signed but not been registered yet, which means it's not a clear title. So I'm looking at this car, and then the guy mentions, oh, hey, when you first started, it runs a little rough. I think it's a spark plug. It's not a big issue. So I start it up, and it runs rough, and I look in the rearview mirror, and there's a puff of smoke, like white, like bright white smoke. So I'm start thinking, this got a blown head gasket, I bet. And Mrs. Wizard actually smelled coolant under the hood while it was cranking and starting. I got under the hood, I opened the coolant reservoir, and it should be bright pink Volkswagen antifreeze, maybe a little bit dull pink. But it was brown like chocolate pudding. And I smelled it, and I smelled bars leak, coolant stop leak type substance that you put in the antifreeze. I also looked along the cylinder head where it meets the block, and I saw dripping coolant. That's when I knew. I told the guy, I pass. I'm not interested. Your title's not clear. It's not in good condition. It doesn't run good. Everything that you've told me is an absolute lie. Guys, when you're buying a car, bring a mechanic friend with you, or someone who's somewhat knowledgeable of cars, because you will get hung out to dry. You will drive home. If me and Mrs. Wizard would have bought that car, we wouldn't have made it home. It would have overheated. And who knows, further engine damage could have happened. It could have locked up the motor or greatly, greatly overheated it, even worse. So the moral of the story, after what you've seen on this car and in the story I just gave you, be careful when you go to buy a car. I wanted to say thanks to all the people who have been purchasing in my Amazon affiliates page. We sold quite a lot of tools to you guys. I hope they help you out, save you some time, save you some cursing, getting angry. That's what these tools that I'm advertising do for you. We also have merchandise for sale, hats, hoodies, shirts, things of that nature. And we've gained a lot of subscribers lately. I'm very, very pleased and very thankful to you guys for that. If you haven't subscribed already, click the subscribe button, hit the little bell. Many more cool videos to come. I look forward to many more cool Wizard videos. Thanks for watching.